Hi, this is David Miller, and I'm here with the first in a series of mini lectures on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. We'll start today with Act 1. And I'll tell you a secret about Shakespeare. His opening scenes often contain the whole play in miniature. Let's see to what extent that turns out to be true for Romeo and Juliet. We can start with a close look at how the opening scene is patterned. When we go on to consider the rest of the play, then we look for how that pattern plays out. Who enters first? Who follows? How do characters move on the stage and just in the first 100 lines? Well, the first characters on the scene are servants, spoiling for a fight. Benvolio enters and tries to make peace, but before he can break up the fight, he's attacked by Tybalt. At this point, citizens and officers of the watch enter, representing the city itself. Although they're trying to break up the fight, they only succeed in making it bigger. Now the heads of household arrive on the scene, Capulet and his wife, followed by Montague and his wife. Then Prince Aeschylus enters with his retinue and manages to halt the violence, if only for the time being. A lot is going on in these first 100 lines of the play, but if you stand back just to watch the pattern, the choreography of entrances, and the movements of characters across the stage, what you see is not only a conflict starting and then growing quickly, it's also a cumulative picture of the social hierarchy, layer by layer, from the bottom up. Servants, then younger male dependents, then citizens, followed by heads of household, and the prince. His name, Aeschylus, tells us what we're seeing. It comes from the Latin word meaning scale or ladder, and thus it makes him an epitome of the social structure that has assembled itself before our eyes, step by step, in these opening lines. In this sense, his name represents the essential function of names in an open lineage society. For as I've said already, one answer to Juliet's question, what's in a name, is the hierarchy of social and familial relationships. That is what Aeschylus embodies, and it's what his name signifies. It's really kind of a meta name, since it designates the function that all names as such have in common. They locate you in the world according to the coordinates of social hierarchy, the scale of ranks. The fine irony of this opening is that the social structure of Verona has mustered its ranks not in a display of order and harmony, but in the rapid expansion of what the prince calls a civil brawl. That phrase bears thinking about, insofar as civil means polite and is the opposite of wild. A civil brawl is a contradiction in terms. What this contradiction suggests, and what the opening scene demonstrates, is that the violence which threatens the social order is also created by that order. It's not some alien force from without. On the contrary, the same forces of family honor and loyalty to the father that bind this society together are also tearing it apart. Shakespeare makes that point dramatically by using the brawl itself to assemble his public image of the social order. That's another meaning of the prince's name, for Aeschylus is also the root of escalate. As you read through the rest of the play, you'll see this pattern repeated. A scene of combat or death, followed by the gathering of the social order, embodied in the two households and the prince. This is what happens in the opening scene, and it happens again at the midpoint of the play, triggering the reversal of the action, and one final time in the closing scene, after the lovers have died. Another feature of the opening scene may help us see how the play is organized, for once the prince has restored order, the dialogue turns quickly to the question of where Romeo can be and what is troubling him. We learn that Romeo is spending a lot of time alone, locked up in his room, or wandering off across the meadow to hang out with the weeping willows. This is a common feature of adolescence, of course, as parents of teenagers tend to learn. Suddenly it's like, hey, are you ever coming out of the bathroom? Unlock the damn door. The point here is that the highly public nature of the first half of the scene stands in complete contrast to the accent on Romeo's solitude in the second half. This contrast between public and private is also a pattern we'll see repeated. Act 1 closes with Romeo and Juliet having met for the first time at Capulet's feast. Here again, the public character of the party serves mainly to set off the intimacy of the lovers' first exchange as their dialogue spontaneously shapes itself into a co-authored love sonnet. Romeo speaks the first quatrain, casting himself in the role of a pilgrim to a holy shrine as he reaches out to take Juliet's hand and kiss it. In the second quatrain, Juliet replies as the saint, turning Romeo's image of the kiss back into that of praying hands. A palmer was a pilgrim who had traveled to Jerusalem and brought back the leaf of a palm tree as proof of his journey. The third quatrain begins with alternating lines as Romeo tries to turn the praying hands back into kissing lips, and Juliet parries by making the lips pray. Romeo finishes the quatrain by praying for a kiss. The closing couplet plays Juliet's unmoved sainthood against Romeo's then move not as he kisses her. Romeo begins a new sonnet with the conceit that Juliet's kiss has purged his lips of sin. She pretends to be alarmed that he has left his sin on her lips. Romeo is quick to kiss again on the pretext of getting his sin back. Notice that Juliet completes his half line, and with it the quatrain, with her witty accusation, "You kiss by the book," meaning that he kisses as if his main experience has been reading about it, and glancing at the tight form their dialogue has taken, also that his kisses are literary. The dialogue has its own momentum, for at first the lovers speak full quatrains to each other, but as they come physically closer together, they exchange couplets and single lines and finally share a line. This intimate moment is broken by the nurse conveying a summons to Juliet from her mother. It has created a moment of privacy within the public scene of the feast, and now the interruption emphasizes the way their co-authored sonnet creates a space of privacy within the great hall. Consider the appropriation of this scene in John Donne's famous poem, The Canonization. We don't know exactly when Donne's poem was written, but we know that in the 1590s he was in London and hanging out at the theaters. It seems pretty clear that he takes the metaphor of the two lovers canonized for love from Romeo and Juliet's dialogue about the pilgrim and the saint. The first line of this stanza could hardly be more precise in its application to Shakespeare's young lovers. And the fifth line comments with wonderful poetic precision and economy on the effect of the dialogue we've just examined. Donne is playing on the etymology of the word stanza, which comes from the Italian and means room. The stanzas of the sonnet Romeo and Juliet create do, in effect, build them a pretty room in the middle of the feast in Capulet's great hall. I hope it's clear now why I say that the pattern of the play's action places great emphasis on the social order itself as a character in the drama. Romeo and Juliet seek to escape Verona through privacy and secrecy, but in the end, their only private space turns out to be the ancestral tomb. Next time, we'll step back to look at the historical context of Shakespeare's play, learning a bit about courtship, marriage, and family types in early modern England. This should help us understand what Shakespeare may be responding to in his own historical moment. It should also give you time to complete your reading of the play. Then, in the third lecture, we'll be in a position to turn back to the play and its protagonists, and perhaps see them in a different light.